call to order tonight's Fishers Plan Commission for April 12, 2023. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we do roll call, we have a new member of our Plan Commission. Katie Jackson is joining us today. Welcome, Katie. We're glad to have you as a fellow board member. And Katie has already completed her oath of office. So welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Stewart.
Here.
Mr. Zimmerman. Mr. Fain.
Here.
Ms. Logan.
Here.
Mr. Peterson. Mr. Moulter.
Here.
Ms. Stoller.
Here.
Mr. Richards.
Here.
Ms. Jackson. And Mr. Stevenson.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. We do have a quorum to conduct tonight's meeting. The first agenda item is an approval of our previous meeting minutes for March 1st, 2023.
Motion approved.
We have a motion. Second. A second. All those in favor use the voting sign aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
And then we'll just have one abstention, which will be Katie, since she was not attending last month's meeting.
Thank you, Megan. The motion carries. Our minutes are approved. Now we'll open the public hearing. And before we start our public hearing, I want to just share with the public the rules and procedures that we have for our public hearing. Petitioners will have 15 minutes to present their presentation, and then for the public hearing, the remonstrators or those who want to talk regarding a particular matter will have 2 minutes as an individual. But if they're representing as a spokesperson, let's say a homeowners association, they will have 5 minutes for their presentation, and then the petitioner could have an additional 5 minutes as a rebuttal. So with that, we will open the public hearing. The first matter is case number RZ-22-4, Magnolia Grove Salon.
Yes, and Howard, for this item, we have received a request to continue from the petitioner, so I'm going to go ahead and let them make that formal request.
Thank you. My name is Tom Perkins. I'm an attorney with Paganelli Law Group on behalf of the Magnolia Grove Salon. So we ask your indulgence for a continuance of this matter to give us an opportunity to go back to the neighbors, some people who have expressed concerns and objections to the project as it was described previously in the petition. There have been some discussions, there have been some changes to the project based on those discussions with the people who had objections. We haven't not yet had a chance to relay those changes in the evolution of the project to the concerned neighbors. And we want an opportunity to do that and meet with them and have a full-bodied discussion about what we can do and what further changes can be made to the project consistent with the use. Also, just for full disclosure, I was very recently hired, so I'm still getting up to speed myself, reading all the past history on this file. So I have my work cut out for me also, but we're really willing to dig in and get this done in collaboration with the city and with the people who have objections. So with that, again, I ask your indulgence for continuance to the next meeting of this matter.
Thanks, Mr. Perkins. With that, I would entertain a motion.
Motion to continue. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, Kay, please.
Mr. Stewart.
Aye.
Mr. Fain.
Aye.
Ms. Logan.
Aye.
Mr. Moulter.
Aye.
Ms. Stoller.
Aye.
Mr. Richards.
Aye.
Ms. Jackson. Mr. Stevenson.
Aye. The motion carries. Thank you.
Wait a second.
We have Mr. Zimmerman.
I got here. I just got here.
Oh,
Okay.
thank you.
There we go.
Mr.
Aye.
Mr. Zimmerman,
I know what's going
thank
on.
you.
Yeah, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next agenda item is case number TA-23-2, UDO update, and this is continued from our March meeting. It's a consideration of a text amendment to the United Development Ordinance, UDO, establishing voting requirements for new HOAs. And we will have Megan Vukusic for the petitioner for the City of Fishers.
Yes, thank you. Megan Vukusic, Director of Planning and Zoning. And let me just get pulled up here the slide. Sorry, it's very hard for me to see this. Okay. So we discussed this item at last month's Plan Commission meeting. This is an ordinance or an update to our Unified Development Ordinance that addresses HOA voting requirements within their governing documents. So at that time, we had language before you all that was relatively simple. It just requested that any change to HOA governing documents require a simple majority vote. During that meeting, we heard concerns from builders and developers and also a representative of Baggy that were concerned about how that would impact the build out of their subdivision. So the public hearing last month really focused on the build out of these subdivisions and making sure that we were thinking through any unintended consequences of this language. We also heard from Councilman Dreamer as well as an HOA representative for Avalon who expressed concerns about the struggles that their HOAs have had with amending governing documents. And so the directive that staff received at that time was go have a meeting with the developers, have a meeting with the community, better understand what these concerns are, and work through the language to make sure that we get this right. So we did just that. We held a meeting with the developers, and we have added in a revision that addresses their concerns, and I'll go through all of these revisions here in a bit. And then we also held an HOA virtual town hall, and that was really geared towards HOA representatives in our community. Although this ordinance would not impact existing HOAs, we felt that it was important to understand what struggles that they're seeing today to make sure that any new established HOAs don't have those same issues as they come forward. And so we had 22 participants on that call, and the concerns that we've heard really throughout the last couple of months are that some of the biggest challenges for HOA is obtaining quorum to conduct regular business at their meetings. Changing rental restrictions, that's been something that HOAs have tried to do, I would say, within the last year, and they're having a hard time getting the percentage requirements to make those changes. And then some are concerned about changing other covenants, conditions, and restrictions, but that hasn't seemed to be as much of an issue as those first two items mentioned. A majority on the call that we held, their current voting requirements were 2/3 or 75%. So it seems to be that that's the standard of what changes to governing documents, what those require. And participation methods currently include mail-in ballots. Virtual participation has gotten more popular, especially coming out of COVID. And then a few HOAs did allow for electronic voting and voting windows. So it's good to see that there's other options to get people to participate in these decisions better. So the language that I have up on the screen is the revised language. And the items that we've discussed are highlighted in yellow, just because these are the ones that I wanted to point out. So that first highlighted there in item number 2. This says that the governing documents must provide for the annual budget to be approved at a meeting of the HOA members, so those that are at the meeting can approve a budget by a simple majority vote of the HOA. So that's something that we heard was a concern, and so we're addressing that with item number 2. Item number 3 is any amendment to the governing documents specifically involving changes related to HOA operations and rental restrictions may not require consent of more than 50% of the members. So HOA operations, what we mean by that is really the business operations of that organization, not the design standards of the community, but them actually conducting regular business. And then rental restrictions, we added that in there as that has been a main concern of these HOAs. And so trying to make it easier for them to update their rental restrictions. And so those are the two items that we would request that 50%, no more than 50% vote on. All other covenants, conditions, and restrictions would be left to whatever their governing documents currently require, or no more than that 75%. So they could certainly make that a simple majority if they wanted, but they could also go up to 75% for those other conditions within the governing documents. And then item number 4 was to address those developer and builder concerns. And so this says that until a certificate of occupancy has been issued on the last parcel of property, subject to the governing documents of the HOA, owned by the declarant, to the original governing documents, amendments to the governing documents as provided in 3 above shall require the consent of the declarant, in this case would be the developer builder, regardless of the approval of the other members. So this language we landed on with the builders and developers. They were okay with this, and we've addressed their concerns, at least for the ones that were on that call. Those are the changes that we've made so far. Prior to this meeting, I did hear from 2 individuals that I think are going to come up to speak during the public comments section. One is an attorney who had some concerns about this language and how it relates to an HOA act. And then the other was Councilman DeReamer, who brought up some concerns with the state law requirement. And so just from where staff sits, again, we're not in a rush to get this approved. We want to get this language right. Just hearing these concerns, we haven't had a chance to dig into those, but after talking to our legal counsel, we're happy to look at both of those, make sure that we've got this language in a good place, and it's making sure it's compliant with any of the other state law requirements. So I would love to hear more from these individuals during the public hearing, and then if you all are okay with it, continuing it another month for us to revise this language again and come back to you. We're okay with that from staff, pushing it back another month. So with that, that's all I have for the staff presentation, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys have as well.
Thank you, Megan. Bill Stewart, question?
Excuse me, Megan. So just to be clear, this proposed language is for subdivisions going forward. It's not retroactive, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And the reason we can't go retroactive is legal?
It's legal. There's really no way for the city to enforce it or to put itself into a private contract. We can require what those HOAs have in their contracts with their residents going forward, but we, as a city, can't go back and insert terms in someone's contract where we're not a party to the contract. And those homeowners associations, covenants, et cetera, are a private contract between those homeowners and that HOA. The city's not involved in those, so you can't install our requirements in them if they're already in place.
It's a contract between the HOA and the
It is a
resident.
contract among the citizens and the HOA of that particular area.
So if the residents of that HOA want to change it,
They have to do that 75%.
they have to do that at
change.
75%. So an amendment
No.
to state law or federal law or going through the courts doesn't help, correct?
We certainly know that our municipal change here, changing the municipal law, will not change or have any effect on those contracts. I'm willing to be proven wrong whether a change in the state law would have an effect on those types of contracts, because that may be a different monster.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Rodney. Any other questions for Megan before I open the public hearing?
Just to piggyback on that, I guess, I mean, do you guys feel like this will set a precedent to open those conversations up easier with, it's kind of one of the hopes, I'm assuming.
We're going to affect those residents or those few areas that we have left that will come, that will be new ones, and we're hopeful that this gets put out to the rest of the residents, and maybe we get some change in the other HOAs as well. But as you can see, they're already having trouble getting voters or people to vote, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, my neighborhood just tried this, and we couldn't get the number of votes needed for people to participate.
Right.
So it's virtually impossible right now.
Thank you. At this time, I'll open the public hearing. If there's anyone wanting to address the commission on this matter, you may approach the podium. Please share your name and your address. And you're limited to 2 minutes per individual or 5 minutes as a spokesperson.
Brad DeReamer, 13142 Oakford Trail, Fishers, Indiana. Also, Fishers City Councilman for the Northeast District. So I guess I'm representing the Northeast District, and I get 5 minutes, but I only need a minute. On item 4, it says by the declarant if he owns the last lot. The problem is that's a conflict with state law, which is in your minutes on the number, not page, but the one that has Indiana code. Item 1, the declarant's consent to an amendment may be required if A, a declarant owns one or more units within a subdivision, keyword end. Number B, not more than 7 years have passed since the original governing documents were first recorded. So per state law, the declarant loses his control after 7 years, but that is not in there. So that item 4 there conflicts with state law. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention that we're passing something that conflicts. And I think we need to keep what's in the state law for the 7-year term. The other thing, some of the subdivisions, I could be wrong, Josh, the developer had, the Del Webbs, because Pulte bought Del Webb, the Del Webbs are 67%. I think most of the rest of the subdivisions are 75%. And I think, and I could be wrong, please correct me, some of the subdivisions have a thing where each lot owner has so many da-da-da-da, and when it reaches 75% of sales, the developer flips it. Is that true? Josh, did they flip at 75%? Yeah. So the declarant is flipping at 75%. So then these laws would be great. Then at that point, 51% can get something done in their subdivisions. So I want to commend staff. We're going in the right direction. And I'm not here as Brad DeReamer resident. I'm here representing all the HOAs in the Northeast District anyway, who have asked me for years to get something done, Brad, as my council representative. So I'm here representing them. And that is my job, to represent them, not builders, developers, to represent them. And as Todd's already said, we're getting nothing done in Fishers. We can't get it done, and we're not helping our residents protect themselves, get changes for the benefit of their subdivision. So we're on the right track, and we're close. So if we could get this finalized, and then the future, and Bill, like you said, it'd be great if we could go backwards for all these subdivisions. But I know Todd Houston and others are listening to us in Fishers, and we might get some state laws introduced after Fishers becomes the leader in this. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. DeReamer. Anyone else from the audience?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Tom Murray. I'm an attorney with Eads, Murray & Pugh, 9515 East 59th Street in Indy 46216. I and my firm have represented over 1,300 HOAs, mostly in the central Indiana area. We have done hundreds and hundreds of amendment projects, so I know how difficult it is addressing your concern that you just couldn't get the vote out. We've had a lot of success with the boards that asked for volunteers to help to get the vote out, but trying to get 67% or 75% is a real challenge. Some of my points, and I'll be very brief, the prefatory paragraph of this, which is not on the screen, talks about the governing documents. There's no definition of that. The HOA Act actually has a definition to include the Articles of Incorporation, the bylaws, and the Declaration of Covenants. So I think that could be cleaned up just to make it clear what governing documents there are. In paragraph number 1, in some condo projects, the developer will set up the membership voting rights, not one vote per home, but they will base it on a percentage interest. So in other words, a larger unit would have more voting power than a smaller unit. So in a subdivision, number one is fine, but for a condominium, they might have different percentage interests. A lot of condo developers will still make it simplified and say one vote per home, regardless of the size of the units, but that could pose a problem as it's worded now. Looking at paragraph 2, the more I look at that, the HOA Act already makes that mandatory. I think this is redundant. There are many provisions of the HOA Act that are applicable to all associations, and there are many that are applicable only to associations that were formed after 2009. So I think number 2 is just restating what one of the mandatory requirements are of the HO Act anyway. In number 3, I'd already mentioned to Megan that the word or the phrase HOA operations is very vague. I understand about rental restrictions, but what if a community wants to change a covenant about backyard pools or fences, mini barns, things like that? And Megan said that was not the intent. It was really the corporate governance issues, the board meetings, number of directors, terms of the directors, and things like that. So I would be perfectly fine with that. In paragraph 3, there's a further, I think, confusion. Right before the word provided, however, the first part of that is correct. But the way it's worded, it almost infers that Indiana Code 3225.5-3-9 goes further, and it talks about HOA operations and rental restrictions at 50%, not a higher number. And those are pretty much my concerns. I do want to point out in paragraph number 2, when that provision of the HOA Act refers to the quorum, it does not set a quorum. It says whatever the quorum is in the association's bylaws. So a quorum could be 50%, it could be 20%, it could be 60%. It's really up to whatever the developer's attorneys put in those original bylaws. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murray.
Hi, good evening. My name is Josh User. I live at 12863 Shakespeare Way, Fishers, Indiana. I am the president of the Avalon Master Association. Just wanted to make a few comments here. I think some of the biggest challenges that we've had recently in our neighborhood, we've been turned over from the developers for roughly 6 years now, and we've only met quorum twice. The first time took 2 continuations at the turnover meeting, and then most recently we had an election where we were actually able to elect the board of directors. I think kind of the challenges that we've seen in our neighborhood as well as a few other neighborhoods, quite frankly, oftentimes at the annual meeting we don't meet quorum. So if there's an opportunity to put a provision in here mandating, a lower threshold from quorum from the start would be helpful. I understand that as this is written, it would reduce the threshold to change quorum, the quorum number being separate, but just having 50% of members agree. In Avalon, our quorum is 50%, and so that's a very high goal just to be able to make things happen. And then my other question or statement was really around, I think it was item 2, just understanding if you fail to meet quorum, how does an annual budget and some of those other things get approved? And so the challenges that we had in our neighborhood was we never met quorum, so we could never actually come in and elect a board or approve the budget. And so there was a very small group of people that were sitting on the board that made decisions that were very unpopular with the rest of the neighborhood. So I think those are some of the challenges that we faced. And so ideally, if we could see some sort of resolution for those types of problems moving forward in new neighborhoods, I think that would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Since I didn't use all my 5 minutes, just one other thing I brought up with Megan that we never thought of that I had to deal with when I was mayor in Greenfield. If we pass this and a developer goes bankrupt, he still controls that HOA. And then nothing really gets done. So if the attorneys could figure out some wording, if a developer goes bankrupt, then the HOA has to be turned over to the residents to protect them. So that occurred in my situation. So just to bring it up, how you're the attorney, how you can do that to protect the residents in case he goes bankrupt and then still has control of the subdivision.
Thank you, Mr. DeReamer. Anyone else from the public? At this time, I will close the public hearing. And questions or comments from the board? I would normally reserve my comments for the end, but I'll say a few comments now. I think it's a great time that we have, I counted 5 attorneys at this board meeting tonight. Sometimes that's not a positive thing, but Mr. Perkins, Mr. Murray, Mr. Cook did not speak, but he's here, and our board attorney, Mr. Redsner, and yours truly. Thanks for the focus on the language that we need to have in this UDO, so I do appreciate that. And at least from my perspective, I think we really need to hone in on these issues that have been addressed today and table this for another meeting. But I'll entertain comments and thoughts from my fellow board members.
So I too noticed all the attorneys in the room and thought, okay, is this good or is this bad? I was questioning that myself, but I'm grateful for the feedback and input that we're getting on these issues tonight. I appreciate the fact by staff in that we are focusing on really working with residents, working with attorneys, clearly, and to make sure that we're getting this right. And am definitely in favor of continuing this until next month, so that way we can focus on getting things done right, so to speak.
Thanks, Selena. Any other comments? Mr. Stewart?
I guess I have more questions than anything. And Josh, if you don't mind, re-explain to me, your unique problem is that your bylaws are codified in the covenants?
So the provision for amending our bylaws actually says these bylaws may be amended in the same manner as the master declaration. So then when you look at the master declaration, it requires a 75% voting threshold to amend them.
Okay, because in my neighborhood, our board has the power to pass the bylaws and to conduct business, including passing a budget amongst the board. But what you're saying is to get to that situation, you've got to get 75% to change your covenants to even run your bylaws?
Well, it's just referencing that paragraph of the covenants as the amendment for the bylaws. So the bylaws would still have to have a 75% vote of the membership. And then I think it goes on to say, like, it's recorded in the Hamilton County Recorder's Office and et cetera, et cetera.
Mr. Murray, you have any thoughts on that, please? Thank you, Josh.
Technically, the way I look at this proposed ordinance, it really has nothing to do with quorum. And I echo the concerns that HOAs, especially big ones, we have a couple that are over 1,000 homes. If you had a 50% quorum, forget about it. You'll never get quorum, ever. A lot of bylaws have to be amended by a vote, not by the members, not just by the board. I love bylaws like yours where the board alone has the power to amend them. But any time you have an unrealistic quorum, and I proposed like 15% or 20% at the most, because I've been to literally hundreds of HOA meetings, and the turnout is always dismal, even if it's an important issue. I always say public enemy number one of every one of our HOA clients is homeowner apathy. You just can't get them to participate. So I would love for this to be expanded beyond just the amendments for rental restrictions and HOA operations, but also address quorum for just holding regular meetings so that you do have a validly elected board You do have a validly passed budget. So these are really two entirely separate things.
So in your experience, do you find other associations that are in a similar situation to Mr. Huser?
Very often.
Okay.
And if it's a high threshold to amend the bylaws, because normally the quorum is just in the bylaws, not in the declaration, if that's a very high requirement for owner approval, a lot of the boards will say, look, we get maybe 5% of our owners at the annual meetings, and that includes people by proxy. They just throw up their hands. They think there's nothing we can do. So then what if an owner who is anti-HOA in a community, they decide to challenge the validity of any of the actions of the board by saying, look, for the last 14 years, there has never been a quorum at an annual meeting, and all of these board members really should not be holding office. So
Or
it
collecting
can be a
dues.
challenge.
Or collecting dues, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
The bigger problem, it seems to me, is if you're gonna go after the rental situation, is that there are some neighborhoods in Fishers, there are some, that greater than 25% of the properties are already rental property. And
Right.
many of them are out-of-state owners. And so you'll never get to 75%.
Right.
But I think one thing that we need to keep vigilant on is the situation where Mr. Huser's in. And I assume you've vetted this with lawyers?
As far as changing, yes.
No, that have reviewed your documents?
Yeah, we are a client of Mr. Murray's.
Okay, all right.
We see the connections.
In 2019, we did put forth a ballot to lower quorum from 50% to 10%, allow online voting, and the third option was reduce the threshold for changes in the covenants from 75 to 50%. We got about a 30% return rate. And overwhelmingly, the people that responded were favorable to those changes, but we were just nowhere near getting the sheer amount of people that had to approve.
You just gotta
A
find them
common
in the
question-
driveway and don't let them leave until they listen to you.
A common question that I get from a board president is, well, can we count an owner who doesn't vote as a yes vote? So if you've ever received proxy materials for a mutual fund that you're part of, if you don't vote, it'll be counted as a yes vote. And unfortunately, that is not the case for HOAs. You have to either vote yes or no, or not vote at all.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions?
Just add from staff's perspective, all of the comments from tonight seem reasonable and things that we can address. So I don't have any concerns with taking another month, revising the language, and coming back before you next month.
Thank you. I would entertain a motion to continue this matter to our
So
next board
moved.
meeting. We have a motion,
Second.
and we have a second. Roll call. Kay, please.
Yes, Mr. Stewart,
Aye.
Mr. Zimmerman,
Aye.
Mr. Fain,
Aye.
Ms. Logan,
Aye.
Mr. Moulter, Ms. Stoller,
Aye.
Mr. Richards, Ms. Jackson, and Mr. Stevenson.
Aye. The motion does carry. Thank you. Next agenda item, staff communications.
So summary of council action from last month. We did not have too many planning and zoning matters, but the Geist Waterfront Park was approved, so that rezone was adopted by City Council. Sorry, I need to get my eyes checked. It's hard for me to see that. And then I also just wanted to provide an overview of the Allisonville Road Corridor Study that we completed last year. This presentation was given to City Council last month, and wanted to just also give you all the same presentation tonight, so that way you can better understand what our vision is for this corridor and keep you up to date on the results of that study. Let's see here. Let me see if I can get this bigger. Nope. All right, so the purpose of this study was to examine the roadway character and the adjacent land uses, bicycle and pedestrian facilities, and other elements that define the corridor. Really what we heard from the community is that this is an aging area of our city, and so how can we incentivize reinvestment and make sure it retains its vibrancy. So this shows the parameters of the area that we looked at. Here in yellow are those boundaries. So this included 2.2 miles of the corridor stretching from 106th Street up to 126th Street. All in all, it was 344 acres, 219 parcels, which included 165 different property owners. HWC helped us complete this study, and so the process we went through, this was an over 6-month process, where first we had a steering committee kickoff. This steering committee was made up of elected representatives, residents in the area, and business owners. So really wanted to define what our vision is for the study. Then we held a lot of community engagement, and I'll go over that here in a bit. We formulated the plan and then drafted practical action steps, which I'll also go over here in a second. So the community engagement, this was really a community-led study. So we had a steering committee this was made up of about 15 individuals. We held focus group meetings, so we had a focus group for residents, we had a focus group for business owners, and then we had a specific focus group for restaurants, because we have a lot of restaurants in this area. We also were at the farmers market, which we got a lot of public participation at, and then an online survey where we got over 1,600 responses. And just to put that into perspective for you all, when we did the Nickel Plate Trail Master Plan, which was a community-wide study, we only had gotten, I believe, 1,000. So 1,600 responses was a great turnout, and we keep just setting the bar a little bit higher for us as we do this community engagement. And then we also held a community workshop, which was well attended. The first image here is from that community meeting. So the recommendations that came out of this study really fit into 3 different categories. The first is land use and redevelopment. So as we see redevelopment occur, what should that look like? Streetscape character. So this would be what Allisonville Road looks like as you're either walking, biking, or driving down it. And then connectivity. So people really wanted more bicycle and pedestrian facilities in this area, which as a planner is great to hear. So the focus of the plan, really where we're at now. So we want to focus on greening the corridor. This area of Fishers has a lot of great mature trees because it was one of our earlier areas of development. It's already pretty green, but we want to continue on this vision and continue to green it. Enhance connectivity, so making sure we do provide safe bicycle and pedestrian facilities, collaborate with our local business partners. We've already have some really strong businesses over there, such as Mashcraft, Allisonville Nursery, and so we want to continue working with those local businesses and really incentivizing parking lot and site improvements of those existing areas. And then just wanted to highlight some of the major projects that we have underway. So the first is a roundabout at 96 in Allisonville. So we are going to be doing away with the Michigan left. Roundabout at 116th in Allisonville, and then the new White River Park at 96th in Allisonville. So greening the corridor, this is a picture taken by our Public Works Department just a few weeks ago. So they're already out there greening those landscape medians, and we're going to continue working on greening the public right-of-way. And then we're also going to be working with local businesses on how we can green the private land in this area as well. Those roundabout projects I mentioned, these are really community gateways. So the 96th Street roundabout, that is our gateway to Indianapolis to the south, and then the 116th in Allisonville, that's a gateway to the west to Carmel. And so using these new roundabouts as these gateway features, we want to make sure they're enhanced with good native landscaping to treat them as those gateways. And then the White River identity. So we are underway on a design for the new White River Park at 96th Street in Allisonville. And so this is just a shot of that area. So again, tying this corridor to the White River, we already have neighborhoods such as River Glen that do already have the river in their name, and so we just want to continue on this theme of this natural resource and make sure that any new development is interacting with that river instead of turning its back to it. I mentioned the enhanced connectivity. So one of the great things about this area is it has a good internal roadway network. And so how can we use those internal roadways to enhance the bicycle and pedestrian, either bike lanes or sidewalks in that area, to make sure people can get from point A to point B safely. And so this study really took a look at those internal connections, and it's something that we're going to continue looking at as staff, and our engineering department is taking a look at this as well. Addressing private roads and internal connectivity. If you've been at City Council, this is something we discuss quite a lot, but there are some private roads in this area. And so again, how can we use those to our advantage and make sure that we include some good bike and pedestrian facilities within those? Local business partners. Really, this is a great example. Mashcraft, if you've been over to this area lately, has converted a portion of their parking lot into pickleball courts. And people love going over here and playing pickleball. It's very popular everywhere, but especially in our community. And so these are exactly the type of improvements that we want to incentivize more businesses doing in this area. So we want to work with the local businesses, see what their goals are, and see how they can align with our goals. And so staff is out there meeting with businesses to see how we can align. In Allisonville Nursery, this is another good example. They recently, when Sullivan's purchased this business, they went in and they actually greened their parking lot. So these are the plans here, and they took this interior area. I'm sure it helps sell their landscaping, but also it helps green and make the parking lot look nicer. And so this is exactly the type of things that we want to see other businesses in this area doing. And then land use and redevelopment. So we are starting to see development occur again in this area, new development. This is from the CRG project, which is a new multifamily development, and then also for sale townhomes. And so this is currently underway. They broke ground on this just last month. This is going to be directly adjacent to the new White River Park. So this is some new exciting development coming to this area. And then also recently announced is that Kroger is going to be moving over to fill the hole that's been there for a while. So we're really looking forward for that development to move forward. And we actually received that filing today. So they are moving forward, and we're going to be meeting with the surrounding property owners here in the coming months to discuss that development and what that looks like. But they will be relocating over to the other side of Allisonville Road. And so now the big question is, what do we do with the other side? So this study does address that, and it's something that we're going to be taking a look at. And it's owned by a private company, of course. So having this study will help drive that vision of what goes there next. So again, here's the focus of the plan and those major projects that are underway. Excited to see how this evolves over the years. It's certainly going to be something that does take 5-10 years, and as we see that redevelopment. But I'm glad that we now have a vision that was really driven by the community. So if anyone's interested in learning more, they can go to thisisfishers.com/Allisonville Road, and they can read the full, I think it's 96-page report if they would like, and there's also a few videos on there as well. But just wanted to get this in front of you all. No voting action that's needed, but just wanted to make sure that you're cued into what that vision is for this area of Fishers. Happy to answer any questions you have.
I have a question. As far as the roundabouts, what is the schedule for those?
So the 96th Street roundabout is scheduled to start construction this year, and then the 116th will start construction sometime next year.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Megan. Selena?
Yeah, I just want to say, Megan, thank you so much. I mean, you've done a great job on this project and really engaging and, taking those responses as online to new levels and really engaging the community, getting their feedback. But then taking that and sending this out and really informing the residents about what the plans are for this area. And I think it's created, a level of excitement within the area. And with the residents, they're really looking forward to some of this development. So just want to thank you and your team for leading those efforts.
I appreciate that, and thank you for participating in the study and being one of those leaders on that steering committee.
Thank you. I echo all of Selena's comments. Thank you, Megan. This is awesome. Thanks for the comprehensive summary that you gave to us. I am impressed with 1,600 responses to the survey. I mean, that is amazing. And like you said, this is community-driven. So you did listen to the community, and we're moving in that direction. So kudos, and thanks for everything that you're doing. Anyone else? Comments?
I was just gonna let Megan know, you might want to share some of your secrets with the HOA.
Well,
To get
yeah,
people to
right.
turn.
As I was thinking, like, we see that apathy as well when we do these plans, so yes. We're no stranger to resident apathy.
Thanks, Megan.
Yep.
Any other communications?
Nope, that's it.
Okay. Well, great. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved. We are adjourned. Thanks, everyone.